is there?
Welcome back to The Explainer, everyone. Today, we are diving into a case that literally shook the entire nation of Japan. It fundamentally changed how people felt about their own safety in their own homes. We're going to unpack the Setagaya mystery, also known as the Miyazawa family murders. It's a tragic, deeply unsettling case that happened exactly a quarter of a century ago, right as the world was eagerly counting down to a new millennium. And as we start laying out the details, you'll see that the sheer scale of this unsolved mystery is absolutely mind-boggling.
Okay, let's dive into this first massive number, 250,000. I really want you to take a second and let that sink in. A staggering 250,000 detectives have worked on this single case over the past 25 years. That makes it one of the largest, most extensive forensic investigations in the entire history of Japan. I mean, the dedication of the police force and the sheer amount of resources poured into finding this killer are practically unmatched.
But then, we hit the devastating contrast. Zero. Despite 250,000 investigators pouring their careers into this, 0 arrests have ever been made. It is the ultimate cold case, and the victim's family still hasn't seen an ounce of justice today.
Section 1. The Unsolved Paradox. You know, we usually think of cold cases as these mysteries where the police just had nothing to go on, right? No witnesses, no DNA, no clues. But the Setagaya mystery, it's the exact opposite. Just look at the sheer volume of data the police collected. Over 13,000 anonymous tips came in. They plastered the country with more than 3,000 wanted posters. And crucially, they gathered thousands of pieces of DNA and physical evidence right from the crime scene. So this wasn't a crime with no clues. This was a crime with way too many clues that all inexplicably led straight to dead ends. It's a true mystery box that left detectives completely overwhelmed. Section 2. A Ghost Town Home. Let's talk about the victims. This was the Miyazawa family. 44-year-old Mikio, who created corporate brand images. His 41-year-old wife, Yasuko, who ran a local cram school. Their gifted 8-year-old daughter, Nina. And their 6-year-old son, Ray, who had a developmental disorder. They were just a typical, happy family, who had found what they thought was the perfect, peaceful home. Now let's look at the layout of this house, because understanding this multi-level structure is absolutely crucial to visualizing exactly how the killer moved that night. The house was uniquely designed by Yasuko's sister, who was an architect. The first floor housed Yasuko's cram school and a study area for Mikio. Up a short flight of stairs was a middle floor containing little rise room and the bathroom. A bit further up was the second floor with a spacious living room and kitchen. And finally, at the very top, was the attic where Yasuko and Nina slept. On top of all that, the house was heavily soundproofed to maintain privacy from the relatives living right next door. But what makes their living situation so critical and honestly so eerie is the context around their home. By the late 1990s, the nearby metropolitan Soshigaya Park was expanding and authorities started buying out the neighborhood. What used to be this bustling area of over 200 families had dwindled down to just 4 families by late 2000. The Miyazawas had actually agreed to sell, but they delayed their move to March 2001 just to make sure the transition was smooth for young Ray and his developmental needs. Because of that decision, by December 2000, they were living in a practically abandoned ghost town.
And out in that isolated environment, some really chilling warning signs started popping up. First, just days before the crime, Mikio actually confronted some rude teenagers and members of the infamous Bozazoku biker gang who were making a ton of noise at the nearby skating park. Second, Yasuko noticed an unknown car repeatedly parked outside their isolated house, which naturally made her terrified of a stalker. Finally, and perhaps the most disturbing detail, local stray animals in the area were found inexplicably harmed in the months prior. And as we know, that is often a major rehearsal sign for extreme psychopathic behavior.
Section 3. The New Year's Nightmare. So it was December 30th. The family had just been out shopping for the New Year, which is a massive, multi-day celebration in Japan. They came home tired, had dinner, and headed to their separate floors for the night. Here is how that fateful timeline unfolded. At around 11:30 p.m., the grandmother Haruko, who lived right next door, heard a heavy thud. Because of the soundproofing, she didn't think much of it. But police later estimated this was the sound of Mikio fighting the intruder and falling on the stairs. Between 11:30 p.m. and 12:05 a.m., the killer moved floor by floor, taking the lives of Mikio, then little Ray right in his bed, and finally Yasuko and Nina up in the attic. This horrific reality wasn't even discovered until 10 a.m. the next morning, New Year's Eve, when Haruko used a spare key to check on them after they wouldn't answer the phone.
When the police finally arrived, they didn't find busted locks or signs of forced entry at the front door. Instead, their reconstruction pointed to a small, unlocked window in the middle floor bathroom. By scaling the outside fence and stepping onto an AC unit, the killer squeezed inside. And the tight nature of this entry point told police one very key thing right away. The killer had a very slim, highly athletic build.
Section 4. A careless killer. Now, what's really interesting about this case is the killer's behavior after the fact. You'd expect someone who just committed such a horrific act to bolt immediately into the night, right? Nope. He made absolutely no attempt to cover his tracks. He stayed in the house for hours. He casually ate melon, scooped out some ice cream from their freezer, and drank their tea. When he injured himself with his own knife during the attack, he brazenly used their kitchen towels to bandage his wounds and just tossed them aside. And most bizarrely, he used the family toilet and literally didn't even flush. This reckless, incredibly sloppy behavior just mocked the whole idea of a clean getaway, leaving police an absolute goldmine of biological evidence, with saliva and fingerprints absolutely everywhere.
And the bizarre behavior didn't stop there. Think about the motive for a second. He stole about 150,000 yen, which was money from Yasuko's cram school fees, but he left behind all the real wealth. Expensive jewelry, credit cards, electronics, and plenty of other cash were just sitting right there, completely untouched. It really begs the question, if this was just a simple robbery, why swipe a relatively petty amount of cash while leaving the actual valuables sitting out in plain sight?
Section 5. A trail of strange clues.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how messy this guy was. He essentially left his entire outfit behind at the scene. Police found size 28-centimeter Schlesinger shoes, which they actually had to trace to South Korea because that size wasn't even sold in Japan. They found a striped shirt bought in Kanagawa Prefecture. Only 130 of them were ever sold, though tracking the buyers sadly led nowhere. He left the sashimi knife used in the crime, he left a skater-style jacket, a hat, and, get this, a pair of unused gloves, which totally explains why his fingerprints were everywhere. Altogether, these clues painted a really specific profile of a right-handed, 5'7" skater-type male, probably between 15 and 22 years old.
But then, the clues got international, and frankly, completely mind-boggling. Inside the killer's hip bag, forensics discovered trace particles of sand. When they analyzed it, it wasn't just local Japanese sand. It uniquely matched the geology of Edwards Air Base, located all the way out in the Nevada desert in the United States. Suddenly, the police weren't just looking for some local skater kid. They were looking at foreign nationals or someone with ties to the military. This international theory was heavily backed up by the DNA evidence. From all that unflushed evidence, blood and saliva, they built a crystal clear yet incredibly rare profile for Japan. The killer's maternal lineage was Southern European, while his paternal lineage was East Asian. This specific genetic mix is actually much more common in Korea than in Japan. This finding triggered a massive 192-country Interpol search, but again, a total dead end. 0 database matches.
Honestly, what makes this even more tragic is that they might have actually had him. Exactly 17 hours after the murders, a 30-year-old man matching the exact physical description was spotted at the Tobuniko station treating a really deep hand wound. A witness actually called it in, but the police completely dropped the lead, just assuming the killer would have fled the area much earlier and gone underground. In those crucial first 48 hours, a prime suspect practically slipped right through their fingers. Adding one final, seriously eerie layer to this trail of clues is what happened exactly 100 days after the crime. A 20-kilogram Jizo Buddha statue was mysteriously found placed near the house. Now, these statues represent the protector of children and travelers in the afterlife, and because it was so heavy, it took serious effort to get it there. Police strongly suspected the killer himself might have returned to the scene to leave it, almost taunting them while paying some twisted form of respect.
Section 6. 25 years of silence. At the end of the day, we have to remember the real human toll here. The detectives who originally worked this case, they've long since retired. The Miyazawa house still sits there, completely sealed off, slowly deteriorating into a grim local landmark. But grandmother Haruko has never given up. Every single year, without fail, for nearly 25 years, she and the remaining family stand out there alongside police, handing out flyers, practically begging the public for that one piece of information that will finally bring justice. So we're going to wrap up today's explainer with the ultimate paradox of the Miyazawa family murders. What kind of grudge wipes out an entire family but leaves the valuables behind? Was it a professional hit disguised as a sloppy robbery? Was it a deeply personal revenge against Mikio?
The sheer volume of evidence was supposed to solve this case, but instead, it seems to have perfectly masked the killer's true identity. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. Stay curious, stay focused, and I'll see you next time.